Okay, good afternoon everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar with 1800RESPECT. I'd firstly like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we are all on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. 1800RESPECT is the National Sexual Assault Domestic Violence counselling service and is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by phone and web chat to provide information, referrals and counselling for people experiencing or at risk of experiencing sexual assault, domestic or family violence, their family and friends, workers and professionals supporting someone experiencing or at risk of experiencing sexual assault, domestic or family violence. I would now like to welcome and introduce our guest speakers. So firstly, we have Melonie Sheehan. Melonie is the National Governance and Stakeholder Engagement Manager at 1800RESPECT. Melonie is passionate about providing partnerships to ensure that all levels of the sector are meeting the needs of vulnerable communities and that primary prevention is at the forefront of national sector engagement priorities. Melonie is a proud member of the Australian Association of Social Workers and has worked as a first response counsellor for 1800RESPECT for 3 years prior to moving into her previous national partner manager role 3 years ago. Oops, sorry, I've just lost the bio. Not helpful. Pre her counselling role, Melonie has had extensive experience in the child and family services sector in Victoria and Queensland. Melonie provides private counselling, consultation specialising in supporting individuals impacted by domestic and family violence, sexual abuse and associated traumas. She is highly skilled and experienced in working with individuals and their families who are affected by depression, anxiety and related issues. Thank you so much, Melonie, and we look forward to hearing from you a bit later on. Next we have Linet. So Linet is a senior practitioner at STEPS Family Violence Services. Safe Steps is one of the 5 partners delivering trauma specialist counselling for Australia's National Counselling Service at 1800RESPECT. Linet studied and practiced social work in New Zealand after migrating from Kenya. Linet has extensive experience in working in child protection, mental health, private practice, the NDIS, family therapy and family violence. Linet is also a seasonal tutor at RMIT University, delivering the undergraduate and master's degree in social work. Linet is passionate about advocating for Indigenous, Torres Strait Islander and CALD communities to have access to services tailored to their own needs, especially to support practitioners to be more bicultural and multiculturally aware when providing support to clients whose culture is from their own. We also have Tina, who's had a bit of difficulty logging on, but will be joining us shortly. So I'll just go through a bit of a bio for Tina and yeah, hope she can join us soon. So Tina is a first response counsellor at 1800RESPECT. She has qualifications in psychology and social work and over 20 years experience working in the community services sector. As well as many years of experience working in various training organisations. Tina has worked in the homeless, crisis, housing, youth, employment, residential and outreach and mental health community services sector. Tina has experience working with men, women, young people, people with disability and people from diverse CALD backgrounds. Tina works at 1800RESPECT as a first response counsellor, as well as in private practice providing counselling services. So thank you so much to Linet and Tina, who will be joining us shortly, who will be able to provide us with some information about what it's like to be on the front line in the service at 1800RESPECT. So just a reminder to everyone that you are welcome to send questions through the Q&A box, or if you have a question that you would like to ask verbally, please put your hand up through the Zoom functionality, and we can unmute you for you to ask that question. I'll now pass on to Melonie to provide some background to 1800RESPECT and the service that they provide. Thanks, Melonie.
Thanks, Samantha. And the good news is that Tina has joined us. So welcome, Tina. You just came in at the right time as Samantha was talking you up to everybody. So I'd just like to start by thanking the teams at the Migration Council Australia and also the Harmony Alliance for partnering with 1800RESPECT to help us present this webinar. Because the aim of it is to help us strengthen our pathways and referral processes for the CALD and settlement services to 1800RESPECT, and also for 1800RESPECT to learn a little bit about the culturally and linguistically diverse communities and sector to also improve those referral pathways and the end experience of the callers that call into 1800RESPECT. So I'd also like to formally acknowledge that Linet and Tina are volunteering their time today, and we greatly appreciate the work that they do on the front line, as Samantha said, and I'm very proud to be presenting about 1800RESPECT with them. So as Samantha said, 1800RESPECT is Australia's national counselling service for people impacted by sexual assault, domestic and family violence. We are available to anyone living in Australia 24/7, and this includes people who are supporting someone who has experienced domestic and family violence or sexual abuse, and also frontline professionals. We provide through our service information, referrals and counselling. The service, the 1800RESPECT service, is wholly funded by the Australian Government, the Department of Social Services. We are delivered by Medibank on behalf of the Australian Government. 1800RESPECT began in 2010 as a part of the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Their Children, which was dated 2010 to 2022. The other national plan partners other than 1800RESPECT, White Ribbon Australia in terms of awareness, Our Watch in terms of primary prevention, DV Alert for the training, and ANROS in terms of research about domestic and family violence and sexual abuse. I think it's an important message to share that our service, our 24-hour-a-day service, has not changed or moved since the COVID-19 crisis. We continue to operate as normal. Our counsellors are available still 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by phone and web chat. All of our counsellors are well experienced to support people who call in when they are isolating or living at home with a person who chooses to use violence. Since COVID-19 and the pandemic, 1800RESPECT has seen an increase in contacts to the service since April, when COVID-19 stay-at-home restrictions came into place. From April to July 2020, there was an overall 21% increase in contacts. There's also been a shift in how people are accessing the service. Increasingly, people impacted by domestic and family violence are using web chat to speak with our counsellors, and the assumption there is that the web chat function feels like a safer format to contact. It's certainly a quieter one. From May to July, Victorians represented 31% of all web chats to the service. This was an increase of 30% compared to the 3 months prior. Victorians accounted for around 1/3 of 1800RESPECT web chats and website visits between May and July. And as you would all be very aware, here in Victoria, we are still experiencing stage 4 and stage 3 lockdowns. 1800RESPECT is an accessible service to everyone in Australia. The service is available to women, men, young people, people with disability, people from diverse cultural backgrounds, the LGBTQI community, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The service can be contacted using the translating and interpreting service. The service can be contacted through the National Relay Service. And we have been accredited by Scope after completing a 2-year training and assessment program on providing services to people with communication disability, which was a wonderful achievement for our service. Men who have experienced sexual assault, domestic and family violence are welcome to contact our service. However, we do not provide support to people who use violence. We recommend they contact services such as Men's Line and the Men's Referral Service, and also No to Violence. As I mentioned earlier, we provide 24-hour support to frontline workers who require debriefing or who are concerned about their work-related health and well-being. This includes frontline workers who are domestic and family violence and sexual abuse subject matter experts or professionals, medical professionals, emergency response staff, and anyone who is supporting a person who is impacted by violence and abuse, and that the service can be contacted just in the same way as any other person who needs to call our service, by contacting the 1800RESPECT number or jumping onto the website and getting in contact with us via our web chat. It's always helpful to let the counsellor know that you are calling for a debrief or professional wellbeing concerns. 1800RESPECT has put together a service directory which is available on our website as well. The service directory is an online searchable database of non-profit services directly relating to sexual abuse, domestic and family violence. It can be searched by keyword, location and types of services, and is designed for use by people impacted by violence and abuse, support networks and frontline workers. One of the key roles that I have in stakeholder engagement is to work nationally across the domestic and family violence and sexual abuse sector to ensure that local organisations have access to the service delivery directory, and certainly that their details are input and updated and reviewed on a regular basis. To be listed in the service directory, it's just about applying to be listed through our website at 1800respect.org.au. We endeavour to update the service directory on a monthly basis, and one of the we've designed an application also called the Daisy app, which is a telephonic application for use of people who are impacted by domestic and family violence, and the information or the data from the service directory is available through the Daisy app as well. The 1800RESPECT website is designed with trauma-informed principles in mind, both written content and visual design. It's got information about our service, different forms of violence, how to support someone who's experienced or experiencing violence, and resources for domestic and family violence and the sexual abuse frontline professionals. All of the content on our website is approved by the 1800RESPECT clinical governance team and the Australian government. So in terms of 1800RESPECT, that's what we do. That's the premise and some context about how we came about. Like Samantha said, I do work in governance and stakeholder engagement. I work nationally across the state and territories with the state and territory-based crisis services and a number of local government organisations to improve referral pathways and create an awareness about 1800RESPECT, and to ensure that we're all a part of reducing violence for women and children in terms of the national plan. And I guess it's really important now to hear from the people that work on the front line and work in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. I might hand over to you, Tina.
Yeah. I think Tina's still having some difficulties, so if it's okay, we might go to, oh, no, she's coming back. Tina, are you there?
I finally am, yes.
You are, wonderful. Wonderful, perfect timing. Melonie was just handing over to you. Yeah, if you can now share, that would be fantastic.
I am just trying to get it. Yeah, I've just had a few technical issues, so bear with me, please. So I'm not sure what's happened on my end. So let me just see what's...
Oh. We might go to you, Linet, if that's okay, and then we'll see how Tina goes coming back on. Oh.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. Finally. Okay, that's a relief. Technology, and I had it all set up and didn't go to plan, so my apologies.
No problems. We were just talking before we started the webinar about how difficult technology is nowadays.
So I'm happy that it's finally all working. So you want me to go through the program, like what my role is as a first response counsellor?
That would be fantastic. Thanks, Tina.
So going on what Melonie was saying, we are a 24-hour service. We're available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days. Yes, I always tell anyone calling, there's always someone when you call through that you can talk to. And, to just make that call. We do provide brief counselling, support and referral information for anyone that has been impacted by domestic violence, family violence and sexual assault. Our service is available by phone or even by web chat. So it's up to the person, and I always let them know whatever they're most comfortable, communicating, that's the way to do it. Some people like to talk, others like to do chat, and that's fine. We do let everyone know that the service is obviously confidential and it is free of charge. And, as a first response counsellor, our role there is, to listen to our callers and talk them through options that may be available to them. Because a lot of the time when people are calling through, they're not sure what services there are, they're not sure who they can talk to. It's even that they don't know that there's any services available to them or that there's anyone they can possibly talk to. So a lot of the time when they are the first time callers, they're quite, happy at what the service can do and how it can connect them to other services. Because I have found sometimes that there's a lot of people that are aware of it but have never made that first phone call for whatever reason and what's going on for them. We do always let people know you can be anonymous or you can provide a name, and that's any name you choose to provide, that's okay. And sometimes usually during those calls and even chats, they get, people get more comfortable and will tell you more details about themselves, name and, a bit more personal information. So it just depends, where they're coming from. They also have an option of their phone call not being recorded. And it can be, they can request that it's not recorded, and obviously, that is organised for them as well. We do provide, obviously, interpreting services. So if there is, obviously, language barriers, especially, people from the CALD backgrounds, worrying about contacting services, we can contact the interpreting service, and then we have, obviously, a three-way conversation with the interpreter on the line. And I have had a few of those cases where I've had the interpreters on the line as well. And, we're having those conversations because a lot of the time, I have noticed, in that, diverse or CALD background, people not reaching out because they're not sure if someone's going to understand what they're going through. So then being able to contact interpreting services, making a big difference for them as well, that they know that, that's a possibility, that, they can still speak in their language, gets interpreted, and then we'll, work towards what they need to be working towards and what, they would like to do, because it's always about them. We do even have the relay service available for callers. I've had the experience of having a few of those, so that's also available, which, makes it, an accessible service to everyone. So we're trying to meet all those needs. We do provide our counselling from a trauma-informed and solution-focused way, and it is a single session focus. So if the person even has called, let's say 3 times that week, they will most likely be talking to a different counsellor and probably even a different specialist counsellor. Just depends, time of call, who is available. And we do let people know that as well, because sometimes people want to talk to the same person. We just let them know it is that single session focus for them. We do provide that brief counselling, and if as a first response counsellor, there's a lot more to unpack and there's a lot more going on and it will take a lot more time, would you actually, ask the caller if they would like to be transferred to a specialist counsellor, because that allows them more time to be able to speak about what's going on and then get that specialist approach as well. We do actually assist as well with psychosocial education. So we talk to callers about, healthy relationships, the cycle of violence, what violence is and what abuse is, because you sometimes have people calling up and we'll sort of say, oh, this and this is happening. What is that? they sort of don't even know what definition it goes into. And sometimes just to call up a lot of people is just to chat, because they're not sure if it's only with them, is it with anyone else, you know, when they're in that, you know, sometimes cycle, being told the same thing. So not, you know, trying to get a real understanding of what's going on for them, and to put things into perspective for them. We do safety planning if it's needed. So if they're calling up and they need that safety planning, we'll go through that with them as well. And, you know, we even do at times the, you know, escape bag checklist, just having things ready if you need to be getting out. The support, you know, available is obviously, you know, just talking through what's going on, if they need a safety plan, if they need any services, any referrals that we can connect them with. You know, what a lot of them have sometimes concerns around probably money and housing, and just working with them on that, and then even referring to services. We do also assist with emergency intervention, so we can contact emergency services directly if that's what the caller would like, or if there's a need to be contacting. And we can also do transfers to other services on a 24-hour service line. Obviously, if it's after hours, it'll be transferred to services that are available after hours. But if, you know, you're during the day, obviously you can transfer people directly to housing services, like Safe Steps and, you know, mental health services, just to link them in, because sometimes it's, you know, needing that assistance even to make that first phone call, we find. So that way you just directly link them in, and then, you know, just, you know, put that sort of plan forward for them and just see where that takes them, and then they can discuss those things with, you know, the other services, just to, you know, let them know that, you know, it can be done, and the links are there. So that's sort of what we do as first response counsellors. And if there's any questions later, I'm happy to sort of, you know, answer them as best as I can.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Tina. And yes, we will open up to questions at the end. So please, if anyone has any questions for Tina, for Melonie, or for Linet, please do send them through. And yeah, we'll answer those shortly. Linet, we'll pass on to you, and if you can explain a bit about the work that you do through 1800RESPECT. Oh, you're just on mute, Linet. Sorry, you might need to unmute yourself.
So, yeah, so just following up from Melonie and Tina, what we do is similar. So we are 24/7 service throughout the year. So we have a number of rostered specialist counselors who receive the calls when they get transferred from Tina's end. So that's the first responders. We are the counselors on the other end. I look after a team of up to 10 per shift, a minimum from Safe Steps, but we have other partners we work with. So my role there is to try to make sure that the specialist counselors are delivering the service according to scope, to support them when there's technical issues, to debrief with them, because sometimes they get very challenging callers, and the work we do is very trauma based, and it can be really overwhelming. Some of our counselors have a lived experience of coming from the family violence side, and they're here passionate to deliver the service, but at the other, sometimes it can be impacting them because they talk to a caller who is probably presenting with some of the challenges they've gone through. So my role there is to make sure that I look after them during the shift, to make sure that they're delivering the service, they're present, any well-being issues, if they need to take time out, that I'm there to support them through that. The other job I do is listening to their calls. So every month we pick a call from from one of the counselors, and we listen. We do the audit to make sure that it's actually meeting the standards of the service. In doing that, is basically to make sure that, you know, we are delivering the quality of service we're funded to do. So during that time, we might identify gaps in the call, give feedback on where the caller maybe could have benefited more, where the counselor did well, and also maybe recommend if they need to do any further reading. The other thing we do is that I'm a link between the partners between Safe Steps and other partner services like, DV Connect. We have WISA from Southern Australia. We have Canberra Crisis, and we also have Medibank, which is our funding body. So I make sure that during the shift, there's a lot of flow of communication between the partners. When we have people who call regularly, and sometimes they might be presenting with different presentations or challenges. I make sure that the partners are aware of that, and if they call back, that we actually give them a service according to where they are at that time. And I also try to troubleshoot. We have a lot of our work is basically on the phone, so we have technical difficulties sometimes, and that's where I come in, whereby I troubleshoot the phones with the counselors to make sure that they're available on time to answer calls. So I also monitor the queue to make sure that people are actually present to answer the calls when they're being transferred. So it is a very passionate job. I get to develop skills for counselors, to nurture people, to give them cultural advice. I come from a background of mental health, so to make sure that clients who are callers who are presenting with maybe mental health issues are not actually missed out, that we can still provide a service, give direction on where they can be linked at, instead of saying, no, you don't meet family violence. So even though we are family violence service, we try to meet the needs of people calling, because they are aware of our number and they want to reach out for help. So we don't just leave them, we still make sure that they're tailored, like they are supported to access the right support service. We try to, like our group, our team is very multicultural, even though the nature of the service doesn't allow us to have that continuity of care. So we try to upskill or share resources around within, like among us in-house, to make sure that people actually know when a caller from an ethnic background calls, what are they, how can we best engage to make sure that they feel supported. What I love about this program is that people can call anonymous and still get a service. So it eliminates that barrier of people having the stigma of calling and being known that they're experiencing family violence, that we can actually meet them where they are at, in a private, if they don't want to be known, and still make sure that we support them to make the right choices in their life. So I'll leave it at that, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Wonderful, thanks, Linet. And it's so fantastic to hear how, there's that sharing of knowledge of, cultural considerations and sensitivities that is so important when, dealing with people who come from a very different range of backgrounds and ethnicities. It's important to have that knowledge shared. So that's wonderful that the service is doing that. Thanks so much. Oh, Melonie, sorry, you're just on mute. There we go.
I could just join a link if it's okay. I hadn't thought to do that when I did my small presentation. Is that the first response component of 1800RESPECT sits directly under Medibank, and Medibank is funded to operate the first response side of the business. The specialist counselling side of the business was developed about 3.5 years ago. It was a co-design approach, and so we have the original 3 organisations that joined Medibank to provide the specialist counselling component of the service were, as Linet said, Safe Steps Victoria, Women's Safety Services South Australia, and DV Connecting in Brisbane. And just last year on the line, Victoria and the Canberra Rape Crisis Centre joined us. So we have the first response section, which is where Linet works, where Tina works with us, and Linet also works with us in a subcontracted way with the other 5 partners. I thought that link might help people to sort of understand the service system. And I think another thing that stood out to me, as everyone will be aware that Tina and Linet are are well qualified to do what they do, is that all of our counsellors have access to clinical governance and consistent learning, but also online access to learning modules that are specifically related to working with the culturally and linguistically diverse community. And one of the things that we're most excited about in terms of, this webinar being the beginning of how we can start working with the Migration Council Australia and the Harmony Alliance in terms of how do we improve our service system response to cold and settlement services.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thanks, Melonie. Thank you for that. Shall we move on to questions? I think a couple have come through the Q&A box. So the first question we have is the web chat function multilingual?
At this stage, so when a caller, when someone web chats into 1800RESPECT, they only have access to first response. At this stage, we don't do specialist counselling via web chat, and no, it's not.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Next question was actually sent through by email. This is probably a question, actually, I think all of you could answer it. Melonie, I think your background as well in this space. So how can we support our clients to overcome stigma when discussing domestic and family violence? Is there anyone who, Linet? Yeah.
So when callers call, obviously a big part of our role is to, other than giving people strategies of either managing the anxiety, because the outcome of trauma like violence is that you develop mental illness, which could be anxiety or depression or phobia. So when people call, we try to normalize that. We try to empower them to know that it's not their fault that they're in that situation, that it's because of the other person who has actually made them uncomfortable or used violence on them. So we try to give them a lot of education around this is the impact of violence. What you're feeling is actually the impact of trauma. It's not about yourself. So we try to normalize and make them know that they're not alone in this. They're not experiencing family violence alone, that this is a common global issue, that we are there to support them, to walk the journey with them, and therefore link them to resources or community services closer to them, whereby they might actually get support immediately. We try to also make sure, ensure that there's a follow-up, because we are 24/7, we tell them that, you can always call back if you always feel like your issue has not been answered fully, that we are there to support you. So, and the fact that they can hear, we use empathy, we are very, we validate their feelings, it reduces that stigma and anxiety they're experiencing when they actually call.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linet. Does anyone else have any comments on that?
I think it's quite important as well that there's a level of an awareness that we can bring with the translating and interpreting services in terms of that stigma, and have a look at the relationship that we've got specifically with 1800RESPECT and the role that TIS plays in being that third person in the room while our counsellors are working with the callers. And so that's something that 1800RESPECT and also Migration Council Australia are looking to build on in terms of an awareness about domestic and family violence and sexual abuse, and how that impacts the callers that are calling into our service.
Yeah. Wonderful. And that's actually a question that got sent in, was about how appropriate is the use of interpreters for sexual violence counselling? Should there be more services with specialised, trained bilingual staff? So yeah, that I guess that answers that question, which is great. Thanks, Melonie. Next question is, out of interest, how do you build rapport quickly with clients over a phone call?
I'm happy to talk about that. It's just about, being genuine on the phone. You're talking to someone else, obviously. You're talking to someone that's, going through trauma or has experienced trauma. It's making them feel heard. A lot of people that do call up, initially it's just about being heard, someone to listen to them, someone to believe them, someone to be there to support them. And even through that phone call, that's all sometimes the comfort they're looking for. And then they'll ask more about other services, but it's just sometimes being able to tell their story and, my experience on the line is that there's a lot of people who have never spoken to anyone about what's been going on, and then we're usually the first people they've contacted to let know about what has actually happened. And some of it, they've been, living through things for, 30, 40, 50 years, when they're calling through, and then they make that initial phone call, you let them know, obviously what 1800, can assist with, we link them through to the specialist counsellors and to other services, and then they, will use the service, probably more often, but it's just, usually that first phone call. So it's just about, as a counsellor, just being genuine and, just listening.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. Linet or Melonie, any other comments on that one?
When we recruit people to working on our teams, we always look for people who are really experienced in the field. We know that anybody who is working in the sector must have really that passion to work there. So we encourage our counselors to be curious about the person sometimes, and that's where the senior practitioner, when you are on duty, that if there's a problem in engagement, you try to chat to say, have you tried this? Can you try this? And being there, actively listening, being curious about the person's story, filling in information helps the person to actually relax. So we have great engagement skills from our counselors, which makes people relax and create that trust. Because trust is a big key in engagement with anybody who is going through trauma. So being there, listening and holding the space for them makes them comfortable.
Absolutely.
And from a web chat perspective as well, I remember when I was doing my training, more than 4 years ago, and I sort of had the same question or query, thinking about how am I going to build a rapport with someone via web chat. But and the advice that was provided to me, and it's so true, that when people contact via web, mostly always via web, not so much via phone call, they're generally doing so because that's their preferred way of contacting the service. They feel most comfortable using that format. It took myself as a counsellor a little while to get my head around that. So it's essentially their choice. They're web chatting in, and exactly like Linet said, all of our counsellors are well qualified to build that rapport, have that curiosity, and at the end of the day, ensure the person who's either chatting in or calling in that they're in as many ways as safe as they possibly can be. But it's always about remembering the format that person has come in on is most likely their preferred choice for support at that time.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thanks, Melonie. Next question. We actually have a couple that are quite similar that we've got through the chat and also through the Q&A. So there's some questions here about asking for what is the process that a counsellor kind of goes through when someone calls and they have no level of English. So if they call and they have very limited or no level of English, what steps can be taken to support them? It's a tricky one.
We work with interpreters. So when somebody calls and English is not their first language, we try to use basic 2 words in a sentence, like we keep the sentence to a minimum level, like hold on or wait, I'm going to contact an interpreter, because they'll obviously state their language, the first language. So we link them to either FITS or another interpreting service, and then that of course can take time, and it can be really hard even for the counselors, because we expected to just have the flow, but the fact that you have to have a third party, we know that it's always difficult to get the right information, because some information is lost in translation, but we try our best. And then with the consent of the callers, then we try and link them to multicultural services like In Touch, for example, in Melbourne, or we have Orange Door. So we know that in these services, they're going to get a specific worker. For example, in Touch, they're going to get a worker who is more local, and maybe it's a face-to-face, which reduces that anxiety and nervousness of talking on phone and not being heard, because face-to-face, you can always see see the body language, and you can repeat the sentence and you can go over. So we try our best to engage with them, even though it takes longer, and it means the session is not going to be 50 minutes, it's going to be maybe 1 hour and a half. So we are flexible that way to give in that connection between our service and the interpreters.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And I think, you know, from my knowledge of how settlement providers work is that a lot of the time we tell if people can't speak English very well for them to say the language, and that generally is enough to kind of prompt the person on the other end of the line to organise an interpreter with that specific language. So that's fantastic that that's happening, and yeah, and that there's referrals to you know, other services that can provide support in a way that they potentially might need or would prefer, as Melonie said before, that people tend to contact in, yeah, the ways that they prefer to engage. Wonderful. Next question is, got a few questions coming in. Is the services open to all residents, so people on temporary visas, student visas, or is it just for permanent residents in Australia?
It's for all residents of Australia.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And we do see a lot, I mean, anecdotally, there are a lot of, and, you know, Linet and Tina would have a much more up-to-date understanding of what I'm about to say, but from, you know, my anecdotal experience is that there would be a number of callers calling in who talked to abuse around being temporary residents and threats being made about their safety and threats being made that they'll have to go back, or being left in Australia without any financial support, or it's relatively common, but I'm sure Linet and Tina can talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, wonderful.
A lot of callers who call were international students, or most migrants. They call the major issues are financial abuse and also visa abuse issues, whereby they are threatened that if you don't do this, I'm going to deny you from renewing the visa, or I want this amount of money, I want you to work this amount of hours. So we try to empower these people to actually know that their choices, like you don't have to. And that's where we link them up with a local service, which might help them even sometimes to get a visa independently, because we know that when you're vulnerable in a new country, I've been there myself, if you don't have good support systems from family or friends, you know, it can be really isolating. So we try to support these women and men. Men is very rare, mostly a big number of them is females, to know that, you know, they're not alone, that Australia has policies which look after everybody, even though you are a student, or sometimes people come as tourists, and we have people who come as backpackers, and during that time they meet somebody who abuses them and they're not aware, and then they're homeless. So we try and cater for these people to make sure that they're safe when they're in Australia, that, you know, they can still get supported to access their basic needs before they actually leave. So we link them to the local services. We empower them to know that, you know, you don't have to be scared about the police. They're there to support you, but the family violence support services are actually there to support everybody. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Linet. Tina, do you have anything else you'd like to add on that?
No, exactly as what Linet's saying as well, and, you know, just letting them know that there is support and assistance available, and just, you know, providing them with that referral information and that support, and letting them know, even as, you know, 1800, that they're always welcome to call if they need to talk things through and need, you know, additional assistance to be, you know, referred to other services.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for that one. Next question is, how busy are the phone lines to speak with the first response counsellor? A call is often put on hold while they wait for a phone line to open up.
Most of the time, we make sure they flow, like the way the rostering is done, so that it caters for like busy periods. Like when it's footy, we know when on Friday, people are more likely to feel so happy, and then we have more phone calls coming because people are too happy. They drink more, they use drugs more, they get abusive more. So I think from Medibank side of where they do the rostering, we make sure that we cater for that.
Yeah.
during the calls, like if a call is not answered by our counselors, it goes on a queue. So as a senior practitioner, I go into the queue and make sure that the next available counselor is actually responding to that call. So we advise the caller that, the lines are busy. We are going to put in a queue. Somebody's calling you within 6 hours. Or 3 hours, and usually we try to clear the queue within like 3 hours. It doesn't really go for that long because we are well staffed.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Linet.
And in terms of first response, I think because we are a telehealth service, it's important to remember that we do see peak times and peak periods just like the average domestic and family violence and sexual abuse sector would. So we are busier on a Friday afternoon and over the weekend. We see an increase in calls to our service sort of from October through to March, which is the sporting or the celebration, that kind of period. It's not unlike the way that the community organisations or the community support services see the ebbs and flows in their business, but we mostly answer the calls, like within 90% of our calls are answered, and as Linet mentioned, when they're not, we offer a callback service, and so we'll call the caller back if we can't get to that call at that time or in that moment. But most, like I said, above 90% of our calls are answered.
Wonderful.
On the whole, yeah.
Thanks, Melonie. Excellent. Next question. Got a lot of questions coming. This is fantastic. Is how do you engage with a person who has been sexually assaulted and has suicidal thoughts? It's a big question.
It is a big question, and it's about what I've said before. It's just about listening. So they're telling their story, and letting them know, just to say as much as they're always comfortable saying, because again, it's about them, their story, making sure they're feeling heard. If they are obviously having any thoughts, risk assessing, making sure they're safe, and taking a lot of time doing that if need be, just to make sure they are feeling safe, and really unpacking that and talking through what's going on there. And then obviously, if there is a risk, emergency services would, be contacted, and letting them know that. So it's just depends on what's sometimes the story behind when everything's happened. And, everyone, obviously has their own journey, and just, talking them through them what that process is so they're aware of what's going on. So it always, assists to help them feel empowered in that process as well.
Absolutely.
We have some very clear protocols around managing risk, managing suicide, and making sure that, the policies and procedures that our clinical governance team have put together are worked through and honoured when situations like that come through.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melonie. And thanks, Tina. Next question is, do you keep data on the diversity demographics of callers and evaluate their level of satisfaction of services?
Yeah, we do keep data. We keep national data, and obviously that's owned by the government, our funding body. And in terms of levels of satisfaction, we're not there because our service is anonymous. And we're working with Migration Council Australia at the moment, just in terms of the data that we collect and how relevant that is to the called and settlement services. But we don't, because the service is anonymous, we rely on the callers to give us the information about themselves or not. So it's difficult to sort of capture the data as well as we might like to. But like Linet said at the very beginning, it's very important also that our service is an anonymous service. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a tricky one. But as far as I'm aware, and I can come back to it, is that we don't do a service satisfaction.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Melonie. And next question is how do you ensure that you remain empathetic while not letting emotion overcome you?
I guess as we said, like most of our counselors are very experienced, so they have deep resilience. That's something you really need to work in any trauma-informed service, because people's stories are going to hurt us. Like we're going to be more aware of things that we see on TV that they actually become home to what you listen to every day. So resilience and a lot of self-care for staff is really important. That's why, like, we don't have anybody who works full-time. All our counselors, most of them are working either 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days a week. That makes sure that we actually look after them, or they look after themselves, to be able to be present during the caller. And then there's regular breaks. We encourage our counselors to make sure we take regular breaks, so that there is a lot of self-care during the session. They use debriefing during the session. We have extra coaching. If somebody has a difficult call and they're not comfortable answering the next one, we make sure that we support them to feel comfortable. And if they need time out, it's okay, because we are there to make sure that they deliver quality service, but also feel satisfied themselves to be present, to deliver what they have signed to do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linet. Tina or Melonie, anything to add on that? Oh, you're just on mute, Tina.
Exactly what Linet's saying. The counsellors are very skilled on the line, so it's about being able to separate, but obviously it is about that self-care. And being a first response counsellor, you do hear sometimes a lot of things that can be quite distressing. So it's about taking that self-care. We can make contact with even senior worker, just to talk things through a lot of the debriefing, and just always focusing again on self-care, and just putting things in place to make sure you're okay, and bringing those things up if you're not, because you're hearing those stories.
Absolutely.
And just to add, I know it's been touched on that, all of the counsellors, both in first response and in the specialist trauma counselling space, have got university qualifications, or a bachelor qualifications and above. And they are also in first response required to have 2 years of practice experience in domestic and family violence sector counselling. And in the specialist trauma space, it's 3 years. So as many people would know who have done something like social work or welfare or a degree similar, critical self-reflection and self-care are really important in how we learn to do what we do safely. And we also offer, the group supervision, individual one-on-one counselling, and support external supervision. So the counsellors across both streams of first response and specialist counselling are very well supported in terms of making sure that their health and wellbeing is a priority, like Linet said, to provide the quality of service that we do.
Absolutely. Thanks. Next question is, it's been brought up a bit actually, is the concept of trauma-informed practice. But this question says, I've heard a lot about trauma-informed practice, but what is it and how is it applied to your service? Anyone like to start on that one?
I don't know, Linet, did you want to take that, or did you want to? Certainly, the trauma-informed practice and the response is a little bit. It's different because it's a specialised service that that the first response counsellors warm transfer to the specialist trauma team. The trauma informed response, and I know that Linet will be much more articulate than what I can be. It is exactly like she said earlier. It's about holding the caller in that space and really listening to them, and having a look at the full dynamic, the full situation of the caller, and all of the impacts in terms of the trauma response that caller might be having, and then working through those responses or that trauma with that person in a I guess, in a self-directed pace, at the caller's pace, yeah, taking a longer term, a little bit differently supported approach. But I'm sure, like I said, Linet will be able to explain that much better than I can.
Thanks, Melonie. That was a very good explanation. Thank you. Linet?
So trauma-informed practice is a strength-based framework whereby we recognize that when people go through either childhood maltreatment or neglect or sexual assault in the early years of their life, or in the middle years of their life, or in their relationships as adults, it's going to create some sort of response in their systems, whether it's physical or psychological. So we know that trauma, people experience the symptoms in different ways. So when we talk about trauma-informed practice, we are there to actually identify that what the presenting person, like the challenges or the way they present is basically because of what they have gone through in their life. So if people come and give us a call, they're hyperventilated, they are really speaking erratically, they are crying, it's an emotional response to the trauma they have experienced over a period of time, which they're keeping in their body in different ways. And sometimes people say, I have chronic physical pain. That's because of the trauma that is being manifested in the way they're feeling the external pain. So the externalization of those feelings is what we call trauma-informed. And as counselors, we have to be really aware of that, about, okay, why is so-and-so presenting like this? Why is this caller calling every day in the morning at 8 in the morning on their way to work? It's because they want somebody to ground them before they can actually go to work. It's not because they can't, they're not taking in, but maybe in the morning, that's when they feel maybe they used to be affected, like beaten up during the morning on their way to work. They need somebody to say it's okay. So we are there to actually respond at the moment. And our single session approach is whereby, like, people can call 5 times a day. However, they have to be presenting with a different issue. So it can't be like, maybe I'm feeling agitated right now, I'm really angry about things, and we talk them through that. Or I'm really feeling anxious, I can't go to the doctors, my appointment is at 2 p.m. I need to go for my sexual abuse counseling, to see a face-to-face counselor. I'm really struggling. So we talk through them to see why it's really important, the strengths that they are seeking, that support, that going there is going to make a big difference in their life. So we try to identify people's strengths and build them on that so that they can overcome their trauma symptoms. We empower people to make choices. We give them information. Women, we tell them, look, yes, this person has sponsored your visa, but there's alternatives. Like, you don't have to feel guilty. Your safety is very important. You don't have to be tied to the visa for you to be loyal to your community. Yes, our culture, like personally, leaving somebody and being a single woman is a lot of stigma, but it's okay for me to be single and to bring up kids. Like, it's okay. My kids are going to be okay. Someone needs to be telling me that, and that person is a trauma counselor, because they know the language they talk. They know the services, they know what to say so that people can feel better. They need to empathize, they validate all those feelings. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's trauma-informed practice.
And so thank you, Linet. Thank you. And I think that was a really great point as well that you made about, I guess, how instant the support is, that people can just call up and there's support available to them. They're not needing to, wait for weeks and weeks and weeks to see a counsellor, but there's a service that is there for them when they need it. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Tina, did you have anything on that specifically before we move on?
I think Linet answered that very well, actually, to be quite honest, so no, nothing to add.
Wonderful. Thanks.
I'd just like to add that, and I think that from a first response perspective, that the councils are informed also of a trauma-informed response to callers that call in. The service at first response is just a little bit different in terms of that psychosocial assessment and risk and needs assessment, and then sort of working with the caller about where that caller is best referred to. So it's a briefer intervention, like was identified early. But the sole purpose of 1800RESPECT, and it has been touched on, is to be that face for that, you know, the national face or the front door for people who have experienced domestic and family violence. But what we really want through this service is to make those referrals out to local face-to-face organisations. That's what we genuinely we work towards, and that's why we try as much as we can to keep it as a single session approach. People are welcome to call us back, but we will refer them, and we will continue to try and move them back out into the community, because we all know that face-to-face holistic care and support with a holistic care team around them is the best thing for them. So I think that's an important point to make.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melonie. Next question is, are the translators usually men or women? Do you find issues with a female caller speaking with a male translator given the nature of their call?
Yeah, go for it, Tina.
I was going to say, I have had to speak with translators and have that three-way conversation. And to date, in my experience, I've had females that have picked up the call. So I don't know if a man would pick it up, what the difference would be, or if we could actually request that, you know, if it was a female counsellor when we're actually making the phone call, because I've always had a female counsellor allocated to me, to be quite honest.
That's great. Melonie or Linet?
Yeah, my response to that would be we don't capture that information. We don't know the balance because the translating and interpreting service that we use is government funded to do that support. So it would be interesting to understand, and I think it's a good point about the balance of, you know, male and female translators, but certainly it would be by the caller's choice. And so if I'll say she, because a majority of our callers are from female callers, if she felt uncomfortable, absolutely, and didn't want to provide her consent, then we would absolutely understand that and try and work with translating and interpreting services to meet her need where we could.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Melonie. Linet, anything to add on that one? No? Perfect. All right, next question is, in some cases, an individual's religion or culture means a lot to them. How do you treat people who doubt their action when it comes to saving themselves from abuse, as it might endanger their religion, community, or religion, sorry, I think it was just religion or community or cultural background?
With that one, I have had, you know, phone calls like that have come through, and it's about just, you know, doing that psychosocial education, just talking them through things, but also understanding their culture, their religion, and if you don't ask them extra questions to gain a better, you know, understanding of their, cultural background and what it means for them. And a lot of the people that do call through are really good at explaining the differences in the culture and the impact and how that affects the decisions that they're trying to make. They're based on family, culture, religion. So it's just about, having an understanding and then just providing that psychosocial education about whatever they need. And then, obviously letting them, make the decision that's best for them moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. Thanks, Tina. Linet or Melonie? Linet?
Our job is not, as specialist counselors, is not to tell people to leave their relationships. Our job is to give them information. As Tina said, we give them education around what they're going through, because sometimes when they call, they're not even sure that they're being abused. They just call to actually get to an understanding of what is happening in their lives. And so creating that self-awareness and also one thing I do about talking to counselors is that, be aware of how you might impose your own values on somebody, because then you actually stop them from trusting the process and actually making those steps. So we give them education, we give them options, we give them information, and then they make that choice. So we don't actually, if anything, we explore their strengths, where their supports in their lives. Is the church very important? Who can they connect with in their local church? What does that mean? And because we want to make sure that people still retain their support systems. Otherwise, we are telephone counseling service. We are not face-to-face. We can't be the support person. We can only be a support service, which you talk to a different person every day. So we still encourage people, if possible, that they actually can either talk to a local church and or religion they go to, so that they can actually maintain that support while they're transitioning into a new lifestyle. But we also challenge people, like, will your religion, like, will, for example, God, I'm a Christian, will God be happy if you are dead? No. So it's about challenging them in a way that they can actually think analytically about their life situation and make those choices to either stay or leave.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linet. Melonie, anything to add on that one? No. Excellent. We'll move on to the next question. So this question is slightly related to what you were saying, Linet. So once people call 1800RESPECT, they usually have identified their experience as violence. We often struggle with parents getting to accept or identify their experience of family violence. Do you have any tips on steering people from minimising their experience and for reaching out and accepting help? Big question.
It is a big question, and I think it depends on where an individual is at their journey in making change for themselves. So we know that recovery is an individual journey. When I say recovery, it could be a mental health situation, like it's a mental health terminology, but it actually applies to family violence. We know that a woman doesn't actually just go to get information, or a man and leave a family like after two occasions. It can take up to 10 times before they actually make a change. So when people call us and we give them information, we trust that we are open-minded that they actually might not leave, because part of what we do is if a woman discloses they're actively in a family violence relationship or a male, we press a button which directly links to the police, and then the police can go and do a welfare check. So that normally occurs if we are on a call and we can hear friction on the other side of the, in the background noise. And obviously we are human. So we have to do that to make sure there's a welfare check. Or if somebody discloses they're actively feeling suicidal, we don't hang up the phone and just leave it, because we know that the trauma is making them feel hopeless, helpless, and they need support. So when they present like that, we also press that button to make sure that, triple O, a local police service then goes, and the ambulance. So we make sure we do that. So we are aware that people are going to take long before they can make those choices to leave, and we're open-minded about that. And sometimes, like I hear people who have been in the service for 3 years, specialist counselors, they say, yeah, I remember this caller used to call 3 years ago. That means they are actually actively in that relationship, but they're seeking ways in which they can actually understand themselves, understand what's happening in their lives, and then make choices when they are ready. And sometimes it's too late, people don't leave. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, Linet. Tina or Melonie, anything on that question?
I was just going to add to what Linet said. How you said, struggling to, accept, to understand around that psychosocial education. So by providing that information, that education, and that can help empower them with that information, then they'll make the choices, decisions, but obviously when they're ready to make those choices and decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tina. Melonie, anything else?
I look, Linet and Tina are absolutely the subject matter experts here, but I just think I think they've both just touched on the fact that our role is to support the caller at whatever part of the journey that they're at, because it's their journey, and we will continue to support and empower them, primarily keeping them safe along the way where we can.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question that's somewhat related, but it's looking at called clients specifically. So the question is, I have a lot of clients that stay in abusive relationships due to many barriers that called clients face every day, such as language, isolation, and the big one being visa. Do you have any suggestions on how to address these?
Part of what we do is give education around how and where people can get support with. So depending on, we can't give them specific service they're looking for, but we can actually suggest ways in which they can get supported, like contacting them a legal, for example, Victoria Legal Aid Service, where they can get free maybe legal advice on their visa status and how to approach them, or they can contact the Migrant Resource Center, or they can contact In Touch, as we said, which is a multicultural specific family violence service. So any family violence service per state, I'm only speaking about those ones who are from Melbourne, then we make sure that these people are linked to that service. Sometimes, yes, it might not be appropriate, and sometimes women get deported, but it means that they, if, for example, they went through Salvation Army, they might get maybe material aid, they might be supported to get temporary accommodation until they are sorted. So I don't think there's any service which turns out a woman who is in need to actually leave them where they are. They might go to a temporary shelter before they can work out on their visa status, and in that case they'll get an advocate. They will get a case manager who might support them and find local resources which might support that person to address whatever, either is a visa or financial issues or whatever. They might not be a lot because we have the limitations in funding, but there'll always be something.
Yeah. Wonderful, thanks, Linet.
And for students, for example, international students, it's so good that we individual universities are actually setting up welfare support services for international students who are experiencing hardship because maybe they're living with a partner who is abusing them, or a flatmate, or their landlord is abusive and they don't know their rights. So they can go to the student center and get that information. So when they call our service, it's actually empowering these people to know that, yeah, you're in a foreign country, but you're not alone, that there are support services which can actually support you to address this. Go to the welfare office, go to the student center, go to your local neighborhood house. You'll get information about what's available. You won't be alone. So, and then we encourage them to call back and check in. The good thing is that we are all trained counselors, so we work through the same framework, and when they call, they get the same information. So we provide uniformity. Yes, there's individual ways in which we work, but we are guided by the same framework. So when they call, they'll see the same resources. And they might see some brief notes on what has been spoken to before, and then we build on that.
Wonderful, thanks, Linet. Melonie?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue back to the service directory that I was talking about. We don't claim to be experts in everything. We understand that there are many layers of complexity in the domestic and family violence and sexual abuse sector, particularly with the number of different intersectionalities that we work with. And so we try to build on our resources and build on our sector knowledge, like we're doing with the culturally linguistically diverse and settlement services now. So we get to better understand how we can improve our service system response. The service directory that I referred to earlier that's on our website, the counsellors have access to the resources in that, and that goes on to the fluidity of how we support people and that consistent approach that Linet was talking about.
Wonderful, thanks, Melonie. Tina, anything else you'd like to add? No? Okay. Next question is, and talking about resources, I guess this provides quite a nice segue to this question is, are there any in-language flyers or resources that we can use to promote the service to called communities?
At this stage, no, but definitely something that we're working on. We do have a number of different flyers, and I can't think of the word now, not advertising material, or I guess awareness materials, for want of a better word, and we can access them, but we don't have them in language. They're available on our website, but certainly a takeaway thought for me to work with Gulnara and the team on.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melonie. Excellent. One more question is, do many young people call the service? And what support are they generally seeking when they do call?
From the data, we do have a number of young people. We would not encourage our counsellors to take calls from people younger than about 16. We would always refer young people to the Kids Helpline. It's not something we're not experienced or don't have the expertise in working with children. So anyone younger than 16 would be referred to the to Kids Helpline. But we do have a number of young callers throughout our national data, and I think I'll get the counsellors to talk to why and how they present if Tina and Linet want to.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melonie. Tina or Linet? Tina?
In regards to young callers, as Melonie was saying, we don't actually ask people what their age is. It's if it's something they wish to disclose. And sometimes people wish to disclose that information, and that can obviously assist when we're doing, referrals and providing them with information to what services, they can access and that would be appropriate. So yeah, it's a question that's sometimes can be hard to answer because you don't know someone's age when you're sometimes talking to them on the phone, and even if we're talking to them on web chat, saying we're not sure unless they're telling us what age they are. But there is services we do refer to if they're let us know their age that are appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tina. Linet, anything else to add to that?
From my experience, the youngest callers we have are around 16, 17 years of age, and anybody younger will normally call about their parent, or a parent will call because their child has been abused and they're there. And because of confidentiality, it's hard to have a telephone counseling while a third party is there, because it won't be appropriate. So what we tend to do is refer them to appropriate services for either Kids Helpline, but also that's where we work with the Department of Human Services, Child Protection interstate, so individual states. So we link the people to child protection because we know they are going to be supported to explore local resources which are more sustainable to meet the needs of a young person. Or if it's they're presenting with mental illness, then we might contact services like Headspace, which are more kids friendly or young people friendly compared to an adult service. However, as Tina said, because we don't ask their age, we don't actually sometimes, maybe we speak to young people and we don't know because it's anonymous, they don't have to give us their age or their state sometimes. However, if as said, like our counselors are very skilled. So sometimes we become curious when we hear a voice is very young and the presentation. So you might add 1+1, but we won't necessarily ask them about how old are you. However, if you hear a voice which like a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, you'll be curious. And that's part of our training that, we want to make sure that the service is actually accurate, like delivered in a more helpful manner to the people accessing it. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Melonie, Linet and Tina, for sharing today more about 1800RESPECT, the services that you provide, and I suppose how, we can actually refer in and get people to engage in your service. So it's so wonderful to see that, there's more and more happening in the space of supporting migrants and called communities and having those conversations about, how we can actually support them better to link to the service. And thank you so much to everyone for participating today and for the wonderful questions that came through. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again. Thanks. Bye. See you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.